Hi everyone, it's Tarrant.
And Stella here from Meeple University on the Dice Tower. Thanks for joining us.
Today we'll be teaching you how to play Nanolith, game designed by Maximilian Witt and Mark Schwemlein and published by Woodpecker Games. We are using a prototype copy here of the game, and so the rules and components are not final.
Let's get to it.
Nanolith is an RPG-style skirmish game for 1 to 4 players, set in the near-apocalyptic cyberpunk Earth of the future and in the city of Neo-Eden, last refuge for humanity as we know it. Your team of 4 cybernetically enhanced adventurers will progress over the length of a full campaign, solving puzzles, facing scenarios and bosses, and leveling up their skills and weapons as you progress. So, proceed and unfold the adventure of the Nanolith. Nanolith is a campaign for 4 characters, irrespective of your player count. So, of the 4 characters, you'll need to split them up among your players. Place each character on its own character board, and for the start of the campaign, flip the card over to show your starting equipment and skills. Place your starting weapon on this slot, and find your starting skills, all of which should be level 1, and place them face up into the skill slots below the board. Find the green start items and distribute them among the characters however you wish. Each character takes a red tracker to track health along the top bar, and a yellow tracker to track stress along the bottom bar. Then give each character 5 blue d6s, an additional red marker, and a nanoshock marker, which will be used later. And with that, you can start working through the narrative in the game's 2 narrative books, the storybook and the encounter book. For a new game, begin in the front page of the encounter book, where it will tell you which page to turn to start the story. As you read the encounter book, anything that's visible on these pages is free to read, and you'll keep reading through until you get an instruction telling you which page to turn to next. This could be another page in the encounter book, or it could be a page in the storybook. In the storybook, unlike the encounter book, there are 2 different types of texts: open text and defragmented texts. Each of the latter is introduced by a paragraph number, and you're not allowed to read that text until you've found something else in the game directing you to that paragraph. Ultimately, every text you find is going to lead you somewhere. Here, for example, it's telling you how to set up the next scenario, telling you which page of the encounter book to go to, and telling you some story and the victory conditions. This one takes us to pages 10 and 11 of the encounter book. In this case, you're not yet met with the scenario. You know that the victory conditions are to leave this lab, but this gives you a picture of the lab and certain things that you can try, each of which leads you to a specific paragraph in the storybook. In this way, within a single scenario, you may end up facing various different types of encounter. In some cases, you may find a puzzle to solve, and this can be indicated by the puzzle icon in the paragraph you're reading. The puzzle icon has a number which you can use to reference a hint in the rulebook if you need to. But eventually you'll be directed to start an encounter, and the encounter will require you to go to a specific page in both the encounter book and the storybook. You'll always have both books open when you resolve an encounter. The storybook will give you information on the story, the setup and the victory conditions. The map that you'll be playing on is in the encounter book, and the encounter's special rules will tend to be replicated on both books. So now set up the encounter. You'll be told to place a number of tokens on the map in specific places, and the icons will tend to be shown on the encounter's map. You'll be directed to set up a spawn pool of enemies. Here, for example, it's 6 security droids and 6 biomutants. And so place that many standees next to the encounter book and return any other enemies to the box. This is the full pool of enemies you'll use in this encounter. Also put those enemies' cards nearby in a column from top to bottom, and you can choose the order, but this will be the activation order for those enemies during their turns. Also pay attention to any special abilities on the enemy cards, as these will impact play. Place the enemy's program cards nearby based on the numbers showing in the top left corner of the enemy card. If there's a boss in your scenario, the boss's information will be in the encounter book, and you'll need to shuffle that boss's deck of cards and place it nearby the spawn pool as well. Anywhere you see a starting enemy icon, place the corresponding enemy from the spawn pool. Ignore the numbers on the standees and choose them at random. Set up the round tracker and place the marker at round 1. Shuffle the item cards face down, keep the numbered hidden cards face down nearby, and keep all the other dice and tokens available for play. Read through and understand the scenario's special rules. Place your character's standees or minis on the spaces which show their icons, and you're ready to play. An encounter is played in rounds, tracked on the round tracker. There won't always be 9 rounds in an encounter. Check the story or encounter book for details on this encounter. A round is played in 4 phases: the status phase, the character actions phase, the enemy spawn phase, and the enemy action phase. In the status phase, you'll be setting up for the new round. Advance the round marker and add a number of reinforcement points to the pool based on your new round. You'll skip both of those steps in round 1. All character stress markers are moved 2 steps to the left, or will stay in the leftmost box if there's no further space to go. Any temporary effects which expire at the start of the next status phase are expired now. And then each character removes dice from its inactive dice area and rolls 5 blue action dice. For each one that's rolled, the character must increase stress 1 step. Finally, before you go to the actions phase, choose which character is going to take the first turn in this action phase and give that character the initiative marker. In the actions phase, each character will get to take 1 turn, and you may take those turns in whichever order you wish. However, you do need to keep track of which character was the first character to act, because there are some specific effects in the game which will target that character. On a character's turn, that character will take as many actions as it can afford. These actions will primarily be movement, attacks, and interacting with the map. With a couple of exceptions, known as free actions, all actions you take are going to require you to spend 1 or more action dice from your pool into your inactive row. There are 2 ways to do this. A basic action will show a number of pips as the cost in its top right corner. For example, using this weapon will cost 4 pips. To take the action, you must spend 1 or more dice, which totals up to at least 4 pips. So here, you could spend the 4 as the minimum cost. Alternatively, you could spend the 5 or the 6 to do the action. Or you could combine dice and spend, for example, the 1 and the 3 in order to take this 4 action. The other type of action is a skill, and the skill shows a pattern of dice in its top right corner. Skills require you to spend that specific pattern of dice at the number equal or higher than the numbers shown on the card. For example, Medkit needs a pair, and the pair has to be 2 or higher, so you could take that action using 2 2s, or 2 of any number higher than 2, so for example, these 2 5s. But you could not activate it with 2 1s, and you could not activate it with a non-pair, even if both numbers are equal or higher than the pattern shown. You're not allowed to combine dice when making the pattern. For example, you couldn't make a double 2 by placing 1 2 and then 2 1s as the second 2. That as well is not allowed. There are 3 different skill patterns: the pair, the triple, and the straight, that is 3 consecutive numbers. Once again, with the cost here being a 2 3 4, you could meet it with a 2 3 4, or with a 3 4 5, or with a 4 5 6. Each discrete placement of 1 or more dice can only resolve a single action. For example, when playing this 6, I couldn't use that to resolve the nanopulsar attack twice. It would only be a single attack and then a waste of the excess 3 pips. Whichever action you take, you must resolve it in full before you can place another die to take your next action. As you'll recall, for each one that you've rolled, you'll gain 1 stress, and the stress represents the nano implants in your head working too hard and starting to overheat. There are other ways to gain stress while you're using your dice. You may choose to manipulate the value on a die up or down by 1 pip, once per die per round, at the cost of a stress. You can't manipulate a 6 into a 1 or vice versa. And as you spend dice, every second die you spend will show one of these stress icons, and that will force you to increase another stress. You'll also gain stress in combat for each one that you roll on a combat die. When you reach the last step on your stress track, your implants go into nanoshock. This is a double-edged sword. You gain 1 nanoshock marker, which will allow you to activate your nanoshock ability. This is all the excess energy in your implants blasting out in one big action. But you also suffer 2 damage, you reset your stress to 0, and then you reduce the length of your stress track. The first time you place a red cube in the final step, and for each subsequent nanoshock, you'll move this marker 1 step to the left. Your nanoshocks will get more and more frequent as you burn out your implants. A character can end its turn at any time. It does not have to have spent all of its dice, and if you do choose to spend all of your dice, then the enemies will receive 1 reinforcement point. A character whose turn has ended, even if it has dice remaining, won't take any more actions in this round. Now choose which character is going to act next, and move on to that character's turn. Now we'll look at the different character actions, starting with movement. To move, spend 1 or more dice and you'll gain movement points equal to its number of pips. Each movement point lets you move 1 step orthogonally around the map. You can't enter a space with a block token. You can't move across a red line. These both block both sight and movement. And you can't move across a yellow line. This blocks movement but not sight. If a space contains 4 normal standees or 1 large standee, then that space is full, and you can still move through it, but you can't finish your move on a full space. The exception to this is an integrated movement, which is any skill or ability where there is a move and another action attached to it, like this rush nanoshock effect. You can complete the movement part of an integrated movement on a filled space, but must then displace to any orthogonally or diagonally adjacent space. Next, we'll talk about the attack action. And attacks can be triggered in a variety of different ways, such as taking an action with your weapon, simply attacking without your weapon, or as a part of one of your nanoshocks or skills. Thematically, there are 4 different types of attack. Melee, represented by the fist, which is close quarters combat. Ranged, represented by the bullet, which is shooting with a ranged weapon. A nanoshock attack, which is anything caused by a nanoshock. And a hacking attack, which is hacking the nano implants in the enemy's brain. However it is you trigger the attack, and whatever type of attack it is, you'll resolve it in 4 steps. Firstly, checking range and line of sight. Then paying the action cost. Then calculating the combat value. And then rolling dice to resolve. First, range and line of sight. The range of an attack is based on the scope icon on the weapon or skill you're using. So here it's a range of 2, a range of 4, or a range of A1. If the range is a number, then you'll count orthogonally from your current position. If the range is A1, then it's any space that is orthogonal or diagonally adjacent to you. If you choose to attack without a weapon, then a hacking attack is at range 6 and other attacks are at range A1. Next, check for line of sight. 2 characters are within line of sight of each other if you can draw a line between their 2 squares from anywhere on the squares, including corner points, without crossing a red line and without touching a square containing a sight blocker. The line can touch the corner between red lines, but not cross the red line itself. So this character is in line of sight to these 3 enemies, but the others are all blocked by this sight blocker. This character has line of sight to all 3 of these enemies, with a security droid just around the corner of the wall, but still within line of sight. And likewise, this character just has line of sight to this enemy, but not to this one because of the sight blocker. A standee that is within a sight blocker's space does not have line of sight into or out of that space. Yellow lines block movement, but they do not block line of sight. Next, pay the dice cost of the attack. If you're attacking with a skill, then you'll pay its dice cost as usual. And if you're attacking with a weapon, pay the cost in its top right corner. Note as well that there are many weapons which have one or more upgrade rows, and this will have a separate dice cost shown here. If you wanted to use this weapon with this upgrade, then you would need to pay a 4 and a 2 as separate dice. If you're making a weaponless attack, then the pip cost is always 4. Now determine your combat value, which is represented by the letters CV, and this is the number of these red combat dice that you'll roll in the attack. To do this, you'll count up all of the red diamond icons on all of the weapons and effects that you've used. Suppose I'm using the Neo Katana, and I've spent a 4 and a 2 to use both it and its upgrade. This is a melee weapon as indicated by this melee icon here. This character's basic combat value for melee is 1, indicated here. And this weapon with its upgrade has a combat value of 2. As such, you'd do this attack with 3 dice. If you use a skill or other effect which tells you to attack with your CV, then you treat it as if you're attacking with your weapon without any upgrades and your base value. So here for Swordstorm, say I spent the 2, 3 and 4 in order to activate this skill, I would now attack each enemy with my CV, which means each of those attacks is a melee attack with a combat value of 2, 1 for the weapon and 1 for the basic value, ignoring the weapon's upgrade. If you make a weaponless attack, then you will use only your basic combat value. So for example, this character making a hacking attack would be a combat value of 1. Finally, it's time to roll the dice and resolve. Suppose this is our melee attack with a combat value of 3 against security droid number 4. Roll red dice equal to your combat value. Check the enemy's defense against this type of attack. For the security droid on melee, it's 5. For each die that rolls equal or above that value, deal 1 damage. The number in the blue shield represents armor. The security droid has no armor, but if it did, you would reduce damage from the total number of hits equal to the armor on each roll. For example, if the droid did have 1 armor on melee, then these 3 hits would be reduced to 2 damage. If an enemy has X for a certain attack defense, it means it is immune to that sort of attack. When an enemy's damage equals or exceeds its life, then remove it from the board and return it to the spawn pool. If you're resolving an effect which attacks multiple targets at once, then you'll roll the combat dice for each target separately, and each time you roll a 1 on a combat die, gain 1 stress. As a special type of hacking attack, you can attempt to hack an electrical device on the map, such as a console or a door. Consoles are hacked at range 0 and doors at range A1. The action cost is a 4, and the device's hacking defense is shown on the map. For each hit, place a red cube on one of these spaces. And as a special option available when you're hacking features on the map, you can choose to take the damage shown in this box here, in this case 2, in order to change one of your failed dice to a success. Once a console is fully hacked, you'll resolve its effect and then remove it from the map. And once a door is hacked, you'll remove it, clearing your path. The third main type of action is an interaction, and this is where you interact with a feature on the map. A critical one that you'll see in several scenarios is a jump point, represented by this icon here, and this allows you to move across an area which you would not normally move across. To use a jump point, spend pips equal or greater than the number showing on your side of it, and then move across to the other side. These could have a different cost on each side, and if one side shows an X, then you can't jump from that side. Do note that using a jump point is an interaction and not part of a movement. For example, you could not spend 6 pips to go 1, 5, 6. Rather, you would first have to move to the jump point and stop, then spend a die to interact, and then spend another die to continue moving. All other interactions are specific to your map, and they will be shown in the special spaces in the information for the encounter. This information will include the activation cost and conditions and any effects. As an action, you can spend pips in order to use an item that you're holding. If you use a start item, then flip it over. You won't be able to use it again on this encounter, but you'll get to flip it back up and use it on future encounters. Non-starter items are single use, and so once you've used them, discard them. There are several free or special actions that you can take during your turn. If you have a nanoshock marker, then you can spend that without having to spend any dice to resolve your nanoshock ability. Nanoshock attacks are inherently powerful, and when they give you an attack using combat value, you treat this as if it's your basic value and your weapon and any of its upgrades without spending dice. If you're on a space with an item token, then remove it and draw 1 item card from the deck at random. You can hold a total of 4 items plus any number of start items. If directed by the game, you may get to pick up a specific hidden card, which is known as a quest item. These often let you read paragraphs out of the storybook. And you can carry any number of these, they don't count towards your item limit. 2 characters within range A1 and line of sight, even if one of those characters is unconscious because they're out of health, can exchange items between them. After the first encounter, your character may have more than 3 total skills learned, and at any point during an encounter you can spend at least 1 pip to swap out one of your equipped skills with a different one that you've learned. You may only ever have 3 skills equipped at a time. Finally, there are some skills which have an ability called nanosync, and this will be shown next to the portrait of a specific other character. Even though it is not that character's turn, if that character still has at least 1 die remaining, then it may be spent in order to increase the power of this skill according to the nanosync ability. Spending a die for nanosync can trigger reinforcement points or stress in the usual way. There is one other set of actions, and this relates specifically to the hacker Cora and her little sidekick panda. For a pair of 3s or higher, the sidekick can be deployed on the map at a range A1 from Cora's current position. While on the map, the sidekick counts as a 5th character for all purposes except win conditions. The 2 share dice. When Cora spends a die for movement, both Cora and the sidekick can move up to that distance. And they can also both move through the same jump point for a single die. The sidekick can't otherwise do interactions with the map. The sidekick's major ability is to download programs from the implants of the enemies. If you recall, we set up a number of programs next to the enemies during setup. These are not programs that these enemies use. They've just been uploaded into their brains, and now the sidekick is going to download them and use them. For the cost of a pair of 2s, Cora can download any 1 program from an enemy. And the sidekick does not need to be on the board to do this. From that point forward, if it's an active program, then it is a program which the sidekick mini can use. And if it says passive program, then it's an ability that Cora can use whether the sidekick is on the map or not. The sidekick can be attacked by enemies just like the characters and has its own set of defenses against those attacks. If it runs out of health, it's removed from the map and loses any of its programs, but can be brought back later by playing Go Get 'em once again. And if Cora runs out of health while the sidekick is on the map, then the sidekick just stands there idly and can still be targeted by enemies, but cannot activate. There are 3 types of enemy in the game: standard, special, and boss. Bosses will have a deck of boss cards to control them, and any type of enemy may have special rules associated with it. The enemy phase has 2 steps, spawn and then actions. Throughout resolving these, there are 2 golden rules. Firstly, any time it's not clear what effect should be taken because there aren't enough tiebreakers to resolve it, the players choose the resolution which benefits them the most. Secondly, any time an enemy rolls a 1, even if it's triggered during the character phase, then add 1 reinforcement point to the pool. If you're finding the game is too difficult to beat, then you can drop this rule as the only change to make the game a little easier. The first step is the enemy spawn phase. You'll have automatic reinforcements, and if there are any of that enemy still available in the spawn pool, then place them ready for spawning. In boss fights, this may include drawing 1 or more boss cards. Then spend reinforcement points from the pool to add additional reinforcements. Here, every 2 reinforcement points would result in 1 further biomutant being added. If there are multiple options in the extra reinforcements, then exhaust the first option first, in other words, until the spawn pool is empty of that type, before moving to the second. If there are any reinforcement points left after you're done that can't be spent, then still remove them, but give 1 stress to the starting player for each reinforcement point loss. Then in initiative order, place all of the new standees, and this means from top to bottom as you laid the cards out in setup, and from lowest number to highest number within each enemy type. To place one, roll a d6 and then place that standee on the space on the board that shows the matching number. Repeat until all have been placed. If you ever roll to place a standard size creature on a space which is full, then re-roll until you find a space which is not full. And if a large size enemy is ever to be placed on a space containing small standees, then place it and move any standees on that space somewhere else at a range of A1. Likewise, if a small enemy is supposed to spawn at a location with a large enemy, then rather than re-rolling, displace it at range A1. Finally, it's the enemy action phase, and you'll resolve each enemy's action in turn, starting with each boss card which was drawn during the spawn phase, and then going through all other enemies in initiative order, top to bottom and lowest number to highest number. I'll take you through the basic enemy activations first. Firstly, the enemy chooses its target. It will choose the nearest character as measured by orthogonal movement, regardless of line of sight. If tied, it will choose the character who's suffered the most damage, and if still tied, whoever has the lowest defense against its type of attack. When counting distance for targets, a jump point counts as a single movement point, as long as movement is legal in that direction. So for droid number 5, these 2 characters are equally near, and we would go through the tiebreakers, while for droid number 1, the nearest character is here through the jump point. Next, the enemy will move up to its number of movement points to get within position to attack. If it has a melee attack, then it will always try to move into the same square as its target. If it has any other type of attack, then it will move to a position where it is as far away from the target as possible, but still within range and line of sight to attack it. An enemy can go through a jump point for a single movement point, but it will always stop at the destination, even if it has more movement points left to spend. And if a large enemy ends its movement on a space with small standees, then those are displaced at range A1. Finally, if the enemy finishes in range and line of sight of its target, then it will attack using its attack value. Resolve this in the usual way, considering the character's defense and armor against that type of attack. Here, Cora would suffer 2 hits. In a boss scenario, you'll resolve any boss cards drawn in the spawn phase prior to resolving the other enemies. Firstly, check to see if there's an icon in the top right corner, as this icon may trigger you to resolve one of the special abilities of that boss. Then resolve the action sequence on the card. This will often have the same set of icons that we saw before, meaning that the manner and strength of an enemy's attack or movement may vary from turn to turn. If your health ever reaches the last step on the track, then your character is knocked unconscious. Reset your health and stress, and lay down your character on the map. To return to the encounter, you'll need someone to revive you with an item like Nano Phoenix. At which point you stand back up, and as long as it's a new round, re-roll all of your dice ready to take a turn this round. If you meet the victory conditions in the book, then go to the page or paragraph it refers to and follow any further instructions. Eventually, you'll reach a passage of text which is headed by a disc icon, and this is called a save point. You can now reset your health, your stress, and flipped down start items. Players can freely exchange start items or quest items between each other, and players can swap out their own learned skills for free. You don't have to reset any found items that you gained but didn't use. You can carry them over to the next encounter. If you lose an encounter, then you'll head back to your most recent save point and reset your characters in exactly the same way. Once again, you get to keep any items that you found but didn't use for your next attempt at the encounter. Just remember that if you gain any reward from reading defragmented text, you don't get to gain that a second time when you restart the encounter. Now it's time to level up your characters, and a major way you'll be doing this is by gaining and then spending the game's currency, nanofragments. Each time you complete a chapter of the overall story, you'll unlock the ability to gain higher level skills from your collection. Once unlocked, you can gain the new skill and equip it immediately for a cost of 200 nanofragments. For 180 nanofragments, you can reduce the pip cost on one of your skills by 1. Simply sticker over each part of the cost with a die that's 1 pip lower. For 240 nanofragments, you can upgrade one of the abilities on the card, which will be one of these two boxes. For example, here increasing one skill token to 2, or here increasing the range from 6 to anywhere. Each box on a card, including the cost in the top right corner, can only be stickered once, so this can't be upgraded higher, and this can't be reduced further. For 100 nanofragments, a sidekick can hang on to one of the programs that it downloads permanently, up to a maximum of 4. If they're not saved, these are lost as soon as the sidekick leaves the encounter map. There are many other types of upgrades which aren't available automatically between scenarios, but can become available if you find them in an encounter or in a store between encounters. That includes upgrading your starter items to higher levels, adding upgrades to the locked rows of weapons, increasing your base combat values, or adding nanosinks to skills with an empty nanosync box. For the very best upgrades, normal nanofragments won't be enough, and you'll have to find high-frequency nano potential to afford them. At certain moments in the campaign, you'll be taken back to the Neo-Eden map, and this is the overall map showing the different places you can go and explore. This too will have stickers and new locations open up as you go through the campaign. Anytime you come back to this map, you do 2 more reset steps. First, discard all regular items, gaining 25 nanofragments for each you lose. And second, discard any quest items that do not show the persistent icon. Otherwise, choose a new place to visit and continue your campaign. And that's how to play Nanolith.
Check out the project page of Nanolith. We'll put the link in the description below so you can check it out. If you find this video useful, please help us by hitting that like button and subscribe to the Dice Tower if you haven't already done so.
And if you have any questions, comments or feedback, please leave that in the comment section below.
Thanks for watching and see you next time.